Hey everyone, welcome back to the Agents Confidential podcast. I'm Eric. Today, joining me is Ben Houck. Ben, how are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Good, man. Good. It's good to see you. It's good to see you last week. So we were talking a little bit. You've been an agent with us for a while, and I've always really enjoyed your perspective. So I wanted to take some time today and just for our listeners to get to know Ben a little bit, the business that you've built, some of the things that you're doing, what you're seeing going on in the marketplace. So really appreciate you just taking the time and having you on today. Give the listeners kind of a little bit of a background or just, your story, not your life story, but, just kind of how you got into the insurance business. Like most people, I don't know if you grew up always wanting to do this, but would love to hear your story.
Sure. Okay, so how I got into this, I was just graduating from college and I got my first full-time job. And I was working with kids with autism doing applied behavioral analysis. So
Okay.
basically, like teaching kids, young kids with autism skills and coping skills and things like that. And I really loved that job, but I mainly ended up working in Southfield, which is about an hour drive from my house. So, and I had a baby at home at the time, so I would leave very early in the morning, come home, and it would be night. They'd be going to bed. So I just didn't really get a lot of time with my family. And my father in law, Peter Sarah, is in the insurance business. And he basically saw that for what I was making at the time, he could offer me a job that would pay similar, but the commute was 10 minutes.
Nice.
So that
Nice.
was all I needed to know. And that's kind of how I got into the insurance business.
So you got into it and you went right into kind of the life and health, right? Because that's kind of where
Mhm.
your focus is
Yeah.
still. It's an interesting transition because I find like teachers and nurses and people that like to help others really do well in this business. What's like some of the rewarding things that you've found being an insurance agent that might be similar to being, you know, your
hmm
your other career? Because did you go to school to do that? Like, you had a degree in that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's degree in social work, and my plan was to get a master's degree and become a therapist. So that was my
Oh,
plan for a long time. But then, having a young family, I didn't feel like I was able to spend 2 more years, not really making any money and trying to get to the next phase of things. So that's kind of what led me to get that other job because I was qualified to do it with a bachelor's degree. Yeah. But your other question, though, was, what do I like about it or what's similar
yeah,
to?
what's rewarding about being an agent other than the
So
commission?
yeah, so I would say what's rewarding about it is that, part of the reason I wanted to be a therapist is because I feel like I'm a pretty good listener. And in general, I prefer to listen rather than to talk, which is why it's funny to be doing this right now for me. I thought that that was going to be my biggest weakness in this, arena because salespeople in general, they like to talk a lot and just have a lot to say all the time. But I usually am the type of person to just listen to what other people have to say and then, go from there. But I found that to be my biggest strength instead of my biggest weakness because if you just listen long enough, people pretty much tell you exactly what they need.
It's amazing, Ben, because I've been through a lot of sales training, and they say you don't build trust by talking, you build trust by listening. Have you seen any like changes or major shifts in the industry through your time being in it?
hmm Yeah, so when I first started, it was about 9 years ago now, or 10 years ago, 2016. So I feel like when I first started, it seemed like things were really pushing towards Medicare supplements at the time, at least I felt, or at least that was a bigger part of the conversation. But then it kind of seems like it was like the golden age of Medicare Advantage, so things really have heavily shifted towards that over time. But as far as very recently, I feel like the biggest change is the non-commissionable plans. I
Mm,
feel like that's really what has been interesting to navigate in the past couple of years because especially with prescription drug plans,
yep.
you know, there's just a lot of talk about how to handle that with your clients because there's a considerable amount of service and they don't pay agents anymore. So you got to try to figure out how to navigate that.
If you don't mind pulling back the curtain a little bit, like what are some of the things that you're doing in those situations?
Well, part of it is that my wife works with me now as my assistant, and she's also a licensed agent too. And so, she's in the phase of her career where she has more time to meet with clients. And so we've been practicing a lot having her doing prescription drug plan reviews because it's a service that I still want to be able to offer to our clients. But I feel like I'm not really able to give it 100% of my energy at this point. As much as I'd like to, there's just not enough hours in the open enrollment anymore.
Right, right. And you kind of divide and conquer, if you
Hmm.
will, right? Assign different tasks to different staff. Before Julia joined you, I think you have other staff as well, don't you?
Yes. So we have another agent, Teresa Taylor. She joined with us, I believe it was 2021. So she had just left her job at a big PNC agency that she worked at for decades. And so she had a ton of experience and contacts and things that she could call on. So she's really kind of a dream employee in that sense. They come to you, they have a lot of experience and a lot of clients you know, that they already know. So she's been a really good addition to the team.
Nice. Does she do admin? Do you have like admin work or you just have agents?
So Julia does the admin work
Okay.
really mostly, but she's kind of a jack of all trades. I want her to be able to do everything I can do and a lot of things I can't do. Like she does a lot of the marketing, like making newsletters and
Okay.
I can just give her a vague marketing idea and she can make some really beautiful version of it. So,
Nice. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. What's maybe one of the better, best decisions you've made throughout your career in insurance?
So, bringing Julia on would be one of them. That has been a game changer because I think this past AEP I would have wanted to quit my job if I didn't have help. So, that is definitely one of the top decisions I made. But then the other good decision that I made, I would say, is playing to my strengths instead of kind of, well, as an example, the agency that I work for, Sarah Benefits Group, mainly did employee benefits when I joined. So I started off by doing a lot of small groups and learning that sort of thing. But along the way, I met my mentor, Donnell. She does, retired now, but she did individual health and Medicare. And when I met her, just that side of the business really clicked with me a lot. And so I decided to kind of focus on that. And now that's become a big part of the agency's business that wasn't really utilized before.
Nice. I'm connecting the some of the points you've been making, right? Like staying true to yourself, finding, your niche of what you really like to do and surrounding yourself with people that can help you focus on that. And that's great advice for anybody. I find a lot of agents when they start growing and getting 400, 500 clients, and are feeling that stress of not enough hours in the day, that
Hmm.
they typically add an agent, right? Rather than adding an admin to help them with that stuff. Would you advise one over the other?
I would absolutely say to add an admin person before you add another agent because, yeah, that was like the critical point, right? Around 400 or 500 clients was around the time where I was like, with all the changes that were happening, not only did I have more clients, but there were more people that needed to actually meet and have a detailed review that year. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend admin person over another agent all day.
Yeah. And they're they're not necessarily easy to find, right? The perfect admin, but I feel like they either allow you to be on somewhat of a cruise control, right? Or doing some of the other work, or, help you really stay focused on where you want to be, or help you go faster versus, especially if to train a new agent, right? Now you're taking away from time of your own production to try to get them going, where the admin's just making you produce more, helping you produce more. So that's awesome. Great advice. I wholeheartedly agree. I'm sure you've gotten a few compliments from your clients throughout the years as you're continuing to grow and into this business. What are some of the compliments that maybe you're most proud of, whether, it's service, experience, having an office? Like, what are some of the things or like that stand out? Like, people always say X.
Hmm. So the one of the biggest compliments we get really often is that like we feel so comfortable here. People kind of feel at home, like they come into my office and a lot of times I have my dog there. They're petting my dog and they come in all stressed out about stuff, but then they're petting my dog and kind of hanging out with me. And there's a couch in my office. Sometimes I'll go sit over there and they're just like, they just feel super comfortable, which I think is helpful because a lot of people are really stressed out and confused when it comes to insurance. So I would say that's one. And then obviously one of the best compliments you can get is just referrals. So, people grab like a handful of cards and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to give these to all my friends. You're still taking new clients, right?" Yeah,
Oh,
always.
that- that's a good question to be asked. Speaking of referrals, do you ever do you do anything like proactively to encourage referrals other than great service?
Not that often, to be honest with you. I would say a lot of times in the conversation it will come up that they'll be like, "Oh, my friend was asking me this question, and then they'll ask it to me and I'll say, "Oh, I'd love to help your friend out. So why don't you just give them my number and instead of telling you the answer and then you relate to them, why don't you just get us in touch?"
Yeah,
And
and maybe they
yeah.
misremember what you said, and then, it's you giving the wrong advice because they said it wrong. Brilliant,
Hmm.
brilliant. Saying, "Yeah, I can definitely help them with that. Here's my card, have them call me." One of the best ones I've seen is just a little sign, near the exit. It was for my chiropractor, and it says, "Feel better, tell others." Right? Just a
That's a good
few
one.
simple words as you're leaving, or I almost think of the old vacancy sign at a hotel, is like you could have something, still accepting new clients, right?
Hmm.
Like we have capacity. It's an important thing to give them an opportunity to refer as often as possible so you don't have to come off like begging, right? That,
Hmm.
"Hey, you haven't sent me anything." What are some habits or routines that have significantly contributed to your success?
Well, I would say recently, as our base of clients has grown, we have started to be a lot more efficient in terms of collecting information before the appointment, by using tools like Retire Flow. And if clients can't figure that out, then by having somebody call them and collect their information.
Great thing for an
Um,
admin, right?
yes,
Yep.
exactly. It's just those little things that you overlook until you kind of have a time crunch. There's not that many hours in the day anymore. So saving 5 minutes, 100 times is a lot. It starts to
Yeah.
add up.
Do you do anything personally? Again, don't mean to pry too much into your life, but are there any things that you do that you've noticed that significantly make you more productive, that help you show up ready to go, or maybe you're still looking for those? I don't know.
I would say something as simple as, being insurance agents, we sit at our desk a lot. So I would say something as simple as like walking or running on a treadmill in the morning or even after work. Just that kind of thing I think is something that people overlook a lot, but it really gets your brain going so that you can be better, be more efficient.
You had mentioned Retire Flow. What other systems and processes are making a big impact for you and your efficiencies?
So I would say agency block is a huge one. That's our, CRM, and I've been trying to make more of those automated workflows where it's like, an example of one is to send an email out 2 weeks before somebody's 65th birthday that reminds me and them to cancel their old policy.
Ah,
Because a
okay.
lot of times with the marketplace, they don't let you retroactively cancel. So if your client doesn't realize it until a couple months later, they're not usually going to let you take it back. So just trying to proactively, if a mistake comes up enough times, then there's something you have to do to address it rather than let that same thing keep happening to your clients over and over. So, um, yeah, I would say using technology to try to help prevent repeated issues that come up like that.
Yeah, and that's interesting, just putting on a calendar, having an email, like we know with pretty good confidence that eventually they're going to turn 65 and
Hmm.
need to do this, and to automatically schedule it and almost have a checklist of for your admin, right? Like, okay, this was done, yep, that was scheduled, that email was sent out, like, just to have these repeatedly. Do you do that post sale as well? Like, so let's say they they switch, they go on to Medicare, you've canceled their ACA in time, they get their plan issued. Do you have like a sequential system at all after the sale?
Not as much. I think that during AEP, we're a lot better at that because we have a whole thing where it's like, okay, call them, make sure they got their ID card. Do you have any questions? But I think that as more and more people start actually checking their email, like I found that they're pretty good with their email now.
Mhm.
So that's actually kind of what I've been working on now in the less busy time of year is trying to come up with automations and things like that that will make their life better, make my life better, and just help things to run more smoothly.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I mean, obviously calling, that's a nice personal touch, but
Hmm.
to make sure they got their ID card, and I mean, it depends how much conversation you're gonna have there. I mean, could
Right.
almost be an automated phone call, could be an
Hmm.
email.
Right.
And I think if you train your agents to saying, "Hey, we communicate a lot with email, I wanna
Hmm.
make sure that, you are checking your email, or do I have to text you? What's the
Right.
how are you gonna get these communications? Making sure your email doesn't go to their spam, right?
Hmm.
Like, making sure
Yeah.
they're getting it. So, no, all really, really good things. What's one thing that you know now that you wish you had known when you started?
Um, I would say that you don't have to know all the answers. You just have to know who to ask. That was the advice that was given to me a lot when I started by my boss, Pete. He would always say, I don't know all the answers, but I know who to ask. So, you don't have to know everything. And I feel like that's part of being a good agent is not saying an answer that you're only 50% sure of just so that you can, move on.
Look like you know it?
Yeah. So, especially when I first started, I was often saying, that is a really good question. I'm going to write that down and I'm going to get that answer back to you. And then, the important part, following up, actually getting the answer and,
Yeah.
you know,
I
so.
think, I mean, again, it builds trust, right? They're just saying, or I've said like, I think I'm sure, but I make it a practice not to give out wrong information. So let me just double check
Hmm.
and see that my answer in my head is still current, or however you want to say it, to get those questions answered correctly the first time, so you don't have to run around and say, oh, who did I tell all this wrong information to?
Hmm.
uh yeah, I've had situations like that too, where like the rules of golf, to learn all of those in the rule book. We had somebody teach us to use the index, right? Look up all the catchphrase words, and then it told you what page to go to, and you could just read it, right? Because I find there's a lot of information out there. There's obviously the current, the past. If information is remembered wrong, written down wrong, and this industry is constantly changing. So anything you commit to memory, you still have to check and make sure that it's still the current answer.
Yeah.
What are some things that you do differently? from when you started to now?
I would say a lot of it just has to do with confidence. I'm a lot more confident in the way that I speak, and I feel like that's just come from being more competent because I know the answers a lot more often, and just having the experience that. Whereas before I'd be like, I'm pretty sure this, that, or the other thing, and then that makes the other people feel uncomfortable. Whereas now I can say things like, I always got to knock on wood for this, but there hasn't been a mistake in the 9 years that I've been doing this that I couldn't fix yet. So that gives me a lot of confidence whenever I'm stressed out about a problem. It's like I haven't found an insurmountable problem yet. So
Yeah, they can't
if
fix
I'm
it.
wrong, if I make a mistake, then we can fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've found that to be true. I mean, this isn't surgery, lives are not,
Hmm.
in the moment, typically on the line, but, making sure you're as correct as possible and owning it. I think you can build a lot of trust with that as well, saying, "I'm not perfect." I'm sure our wives would agree.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, I wanted to go back 1 second on you said, an important thing was to feel that you didn't have to know everything.
Hmm.
I think a lot of agents get tied, especially new agents, will get tied up in training so much and saying, well, I want to make sure that I can answer every question that's out there. And
Hmm.
what I find is that they learn a lot, but they're not building confidence in sharing that information because they're not talking to enough prospects or clients. Would you agree that there's a balance there where, yes, we have to get some knowledge, but we also have to put it into practice?
Yes, especially because I feel like the best way to learn is experience. So I'm definitely the type of person to read and train and read and read and read until my head hurts. But unfortunately, the best way to learn is to make a little mistake here or there. A lot of the best things I know are because I thought the policy worked this way, but then a situation came up, it did not work that way. And I
Yeah.
never forgot that. So unfortunately, at some point, you have to take action. You can't just learn. Although I do believe in the value of learning, but yeah, you got to
Yeah.
use it.
Ben, this has been really good. You're a wealth of knowledge and very pleasant to talk to. You gotta continue that confidence of being confident in sharing your information, because I know a lot of agents and clients are going to benefit from your knowledge. If there's an agent listening today to this episode, what's one piece of advice that you'd really want them to remember from our talk today?
I would say that the biggest piece of advice I have would be to play to your own strengths and do more of what is working and less of what is not working. Um,
Gotcha.
so for example, if you're like in my agency, we mostly did group benefits, but I'm not real big on public speaking and things of that nature. So that wasn't for me. So instead of fighting against that, I started to gravitate towards what made me feel more comfortable, and that has really paid off and worked well for me.
That's awesome. As everybody knows, I like golf. Whenever I find somebody I'm talking with that also likes golf, I naturally feel more comfortable, right? It's like, oh, you're one of us kind of thing. Gets me really comfortable talking with them, and you can have a lot more in common. So great advice, Ben. Really appreciate you taking the time today. This was Ben Houck with Sarah Benefits.
Sarah Benefits Group.
Ben, thank you again so much. It's another episode of Agents Confidential. We'll see you on the next episode.